The harbor was wrapped in the soft embrace of dusk, the horizon a watercolor wash of lavender and pale gold. The tide breathed slowly against the wooden pilings, and the air was rich with the mingled scents of salt, tarred rope, and the faint sweetness of seaweed drying along the shore. Nets lay in gentle heaps, their coarse fibers warm from the day's sun, waiting for hands that knew their knots like old friends. A fisherman, shoulders slightly bent with years, sat on a low stool, the quiet rhythm of his mending as steady as the tide. His fingers moved without hurry, drawing twine through worn holes, the slight rasp of cord against cord, a patient whisper in the air. Seabirds drifted overhead, their wings catching the fading light, and from somewhere down the quay came the faint creak of a moored boat settling into its berth. The world beyond the harbor seemed far away, as though dusk itself had built a wall of calm. Each knot tied was both a repair and a promise of tomorrow's catch, of the tide's return, of the simple dignity in work done well. As the light deepened into blue, a small lantern was lit, its glow catching in the fisherman's weathered hands. The first stars emerged above, the reflection trembling in the harbor water, as if the sky and sea had come together to share the same slow heartbeat. The evening air carried a softness that seemed to settle over every plank, post, and sailcloth along the harbor. Fishing nets, spread out like great woven tapestries, lay across the worn boards of the pier, their damp threads darkened by the day's work. A young apprentice sat cross-legged beside an older fisherman, the two framed by the fading light that painted the sea in shades of burnished copper and deepening indigo. The boy's small hands mimicked the steady movements of the elder, fingers threading the repair twine through loose gaps, pulling gently until the mesh held firm again. Somewhere far out on the water, a bell buoy tolled its lonely note, slow and deliberate, like the breathing of the tide itself. From a nearby cottage, the scent of fish stew drifted down with the breeze, warm and reassuring. Wooden buckets, coiled ropes, and a scattering of seashells caught the light of the sinking sun, their edges glowing as if rimmed with gold. The harbor was not in a hurry. It never was at this hour. In the hush between each pull of thread, the sound of small waves lapping against the hulls was as steady as a lullaby. A gull landed on a piling, folding its wings with patient ease, watching the work as if it too understood the quiet ritual. The day was ending not with a rush, but with care, with small knots tied in the hope of another safe return to shore.
Lantern light swayed gently in the breeze, casting circles of gold over the harbor planks where nets lay in long, patient rows. The sun had already slipped beneath the horizon, leaving the sky a deep, velvety blue, streaked with the last traces of fading rose. Two women worked side by side, their shawls drawn close against the evening chill, their hands moving with the easy familiarity of years. The coarse hemp threads rasped softly under their fingertips, each loop and pull an act of quiet diligence. The water nearby murmured against the hulls of moored fishing boats, the faint rocking sound blending with the occasional clink of a metal hook against wood. From across the water came the muffled laughter of sailors finishing their evening meal, their voices softened by distance and the gentle air. In the shadows at the edge of the pier, a cat sat curled, its tail wrapped tightly around its body, watching the women with slow blinks of approval. The faint smell of wood smoke from the village chimneys drifted down toward the harbor, mingling with the salt-sweet scent of the sea. Every so often, a hand would pause mid-motion to tighten a knot, the momentary stillness allowing the sounds of the evening, the tide's sigh, the creak of timbers, to weave themselves into the fabric of the task. By the time the first stars dotted the sky, the nets were neatly folded, ready for the morning, their repairs invisible except to the eyes that had made them.
The last light of day lingered in a thin golden band along the edge of the sea, while the rest of the sky deepened into the soft blues of night. The harbor, once alive with shouts and the clatter of returning boats, had fallen into a hush, broken only by the lap of water against the pier. Near the water's edge, a fisherman worked alone, seated on a low bench worn smooth by years of use. A half-mended net spilled over his knees, the fibers rough but familiar beneath his calloused palms. Each movement was deliberate, the thread pulled snug and then released, the knots tight but never hurried. Beside him, a small clay mug of tea sent up wisps of steam, its warmth mingling with the faint chill rising from the water. Further down the quay, the faint glow of a lantern traced the silhouette of another figure bending over their own repair work. Between the two, silence stretched like a shared comfort, the kind that needs no words. Above, the first gulls to settle for the night stood balanced on the crossbeams of the pier, their white feathers faintly luminous in the fading light. Somewhere in the distance, the slow beat of oars in water marked the return of a late boat, its sound blending seamlessly with the rhythm of the fisherman's work. When the final knot was tied, he set the net aside with a quiet satisfaction, the day's labor ending as the night's calm fully embraced the harbor.
A soft mist drifted in from the open water, settling gently over the harbor until the outlines of the boats looked like faded sketches against the dimming sky. On the pier, an elderly couple sat side by side, their knees touching as they worked a wide, weathered net between them. The man's fingers moved with the rhythm of long habit, pulling the twine through with a twist and a knot, while the woman's hands followed close behind, smoothing each repaired section so it lay flat. The air was rich with the mingled scents of salt, tarred rope, and the faint sweetness of drying seaweed clinging to the wooden pilings. Somewhere farther along the quay, the soft thud of a barrel being rolled into storage echoed briefly before fading back into stillness. A line of moored boats bobbed gently, their ropes creaking in unison as the tide shifted. The only light came from a small oil lantern balanced on an overturned crate, its glow illuminating the silver threads in the couple's hair. Between them, the repaired sections of the net grew steadily, each knot a small promise for the days ahead. The mist beaded on their coats and lashes, but neither seemed to mind. The slow, shared work was its own warmth. Above, a faint glimmer of moon broke through the clouds, lighting the ripples of the harbor as if to remind them that even in the quiet, the world was still moving gently forward. The tide was low, revealing the dark, seaweed-draped stones that formed the harbor wall. Down at the farthest edge, where the pier met the open water, a young woman knelt beside a heap of tangled netting. She worked steadily, her hands deftly separating the knotted loops, her breath misting faintly in the cool evening air. A basket of spools and needles rested beside her, their polished wood glinting softly in the slanting dusk light. The sound of water lapping against the pilings set a slow rhythm to her work, each loop and stitch falling into step with the harbor's breathing. Above her, swallows traced quick arcs through the darkening sky before settling on the rafters of an empty boathouse, their tiny chirps a counterpoint to the deep, steady sigh of the sea. The faint aroma of bread baking somewhere up the slope drifted toward her, mingling with the briny scent of the exposed shore. In the distance, lanterns flickered to life along the village's narrow streets, their reflections trembling in the ripples between the boats. She paused now and then to hold the net up to the light, the repaired mesh catching the glow in a delicate pattern like lace. By the time she set her tools aside, the evening had deepened into a soft indigo, the water whispering at her feet as if in quiet approval.
The harbor at dusk was a painting, slowly losing its colors to the night. Shadows gathered beneath the boats, and the water mirrored the sky's quiet transformation from amber to deep blue. Near the shore, a group of fishermen sat in a loose circle, Their work spread across their laps and the worn boards around them. One hummed a low, tuneless melody as his fingers worked, while another paused occasionally to take a sip from a leather flask, passing it to the next without a word. Their nets were vast, spilling outward like woven rivers, each frayed edge patiently coaxed back into order. Behind them, the faint clatter of wooden crates being stacked for the morning's market punctuated the evening air. The scent of pine tar from freshly mended boat seams drifted in from the dockyards, mingling with the sharper tang of drying fish. Above, the first stars blinked awake, their light barely touching the edges of the scene, leaving most of the work in a cocoon of warm shadow cast by the fishermen's lanterns. Every now and then, the group would share a quiet laugh, the sound low and unhurried, before settling again into the rhythm of repair. The harbor's stillness was not empty, but full of the soft cadence of hands in motion, the creak of wood beneath them, the far-off call of a night bird. And within that fullness, the day ended as it had for countless years, in calm labor beneath the slowly darkening sky.